Colin, we need to get an understanding of what is, we can very easily show what it costs in terms of to respond, to Maggie's call. So I think we do need to have that same kind of a breakdown in terms of the cost of what are called wildfires. But I absolutely agree, or arson. And I would also like that if we could get the same, I'm not asking you again to necessarily give us detail of this today, but if we have some understanding of the cost in terms of actual finances, but resources, and what has already been outlined by yourself, Chair, to the health and potential health of fire officers in terms of the danger of the 11th night bonfires. So, and I'm thinking specifically, obviously, about the one that was highlighted, and I don't even want to get into politics over this because it isn't about that. I'm speaking as somebody who deals with people who have asbestosis, and that's terminal. You're not recovering from that. So, on a site where there is asbestos, what does that mean for your officers trying to make that safe for the public? But what about them? What about those officers and the danger and risk to their health? So there's a cost in terms of financially, resources, and then to the potential health of officers as well as the general public. And how do we try to highlight that in terms of, making it clear? Do what you have to do, but do it safely. And do it in a way that does not put lives at risk, and do it in a way that does not put fire officers at risk, and do it in a way that does not take away resources from the rest of our fire service and our health service in general.
I equally won't get into the politics of that. It's not the place for me. But what I would say about asbestos and asbestosis and all those risks presented, I know there's a site that's particularly of political interest and conversation. I've noted that last year and again this year. But all of those fires, and it's why I'm in that drive prevention space, every incident we attend from a fire and rescue service perspective, when it's a fire, it's in the built environment. It's a property fire, a building on fire. Our buildings weren't built entirely in the last 25 to 30 years. Therefore, they all have asbestos, or likely have asbestos elements in, and we have clear protocols around identifying that, where that is. Some of them are even older and have clearly asbestos roofs. We have hazardous materials officers. I was one in my own time in service. I no longer perform that function, but identifying the presence of asbestos and other contaminants, putting in safety protocols to maintain firefighters, potentially external firefighting as opposed to coming to the building. In some of those cases, of course, prevalent where there's risk to life, we'll absolutely. Decontamination of PPE and washing of laundry, and disposal and destruction of that, in fact, if we need to do that, depending on the type of asbestos. So again, there are clear protocols, operational guidance around dealing with contaminants, including asbestos, which focus on the safety and well-being of our firefighters.
Okay, so, and I suppose at some point I'd like to get an understanding, as I say, of the cost, of the actual financial cost and the resource cost of all of the issues that I've outlined, because yes, we have fires that are accidental, but when it's something that we can maybe plan for, maybe do better at, and I'm saying that and trying to be sensitive about it, because I'm not trying to block anybody's ability to do that, but it's about how we do it differently. On a personal note, I hate bonfires, no matter where they are, who's lighting them, but I understand that everybody feels differently on this issue, but I think it's really important that it's done in a way that is not drawing away resources from our health service, from our fire service, from Maggie's call, and is being done in a way that is not respectful or responsible in terms of your officers or the wider public. I think it's worth saying that. I appreciate the answers that you've given. Can I ask one last question on the battery storage hubs that you actually referred to? When planning applications are in, I mean, we see some of them, and we'll see from the those companies that are working on behalf of the applicants that, giving us all the detail of the measures they've put in place. Are you actually one of the consultees in relation to that? And have you been given, I suppose, do you think there's enough research, enough understanding to actually give you the knowledge to be able to make a good response to that consultation?
Okay. We're not a statutory consultee in relation to BESS sites, battery energy storage. We're not a statutory consultee in that process. We work very clearly, and we have two planning authorities provided the National Fire Chiefs Council position statement around battery energy storage. So the information that needs to be there to make those decisions is there around fire risk plans, around fire water contaminant and runoff, around separation and planning of how those sites are separated, of how the batteries and storage are and separate to prevent fire spread and thermal runaway and all those issues that come with battery energy storage. It is a growing and ever-changing dynamic, increasingly complex risk, as so many things are. And the piece I said at the very start today in my introduction around the changing, growing, changing strategic risks, more complex incidents, flooding, wildfire, all of those. This is another area, and it's not just on, and the members asked specifically about best sites where battery energy storage is, but it's not just in those sites. In fact, in Northern Ireland, we've not had a response to those at all at this point, but we do see lithium-ion batteries. We'd won last night a mobilisation in Lisburn's area. I wasn't at the incident, I heard it on the radio going home. Scooters, mobile phones, golf trolleys, all of those things have lithium-ion batteries, and they're extremely difficult to extinguish in fire. There is a process called thermal runaway where the cells in the battery will break down. If it's damaged, breaks down, and one cell leads to the next cell, and that fire continues. Motor vehicles, EV, charging, all of that. Those are some of, and only some of, the complex incidents that I respond to and our people respond to. And that's that growth in the requirement for training, professionalising, competence of our firefighters, how you deal with those fires, because it's not the traditional firefighting methods that will address those. And we're seeing those in homes. We're seeing them, mobile phones charging, not being appropriately charged, being damaged and dropped. We've seen in the United States, New York, and indeed in London, significant battery fires, lithium-ion batteries that have led to significant loss of life. So there's no doubt the emerging technologies, as we talk about them, and it's not just batteries, but emerging technologies are changing the landscape of fire, and we can't keep up with the pace at which technology is moving around fire prevention. Smoke alarms in homes. We've not gone there, not specific to the member's question, and none of the incidents last year were, but last year in Northern Ireland, calendar year, 14 people lost their lives. Financial year, 16 people lost their lives. And that's the worst that we've seen in 26 years. That's a significant loss of life. What needs to be done? What message can we get out? How do we work with our partners to prevent that? That's a critical piece of the conversation, I feel, in speaking to the committee here today. More must be done. We need to be able to work even harder with our partners, and we are doing so, around those people who are most vulnerable in the community. We have a key part to play within the Department of Health and the neighbourhood model. As people come out of the back doors of hospital and out into the community for care, and the appropriate care closer to home, we have a role to play there in those people going back into their homes, in completion of our home fire safety check scheme, in delivery of and checking where smoke alarms are in the home. For the most part, most of those people are no longer living as they previously lived. They may not be upstairs anymore in a bedroom. Smoke alarms traditionally, and I've asked members today, smoke alarm is probably downstairs in the hall and probably upstairs in the landing. That's always been the advice. But when someone comes out of the back door of hospital and is still receiving care in the house, they may not be mobile any longer. They may not be able to get up the stairs. They may be living in a downstairs room. And that's common, and we see that. Those people may have a care package in place. They may now be staying in that downstairs room. If that is they're a smoker, or if they have a candle, potentially the last person they see at night is the carer, and most likely the first person coming to them tomorrow morning is the carer again. And if anything has happened in that room where they're now sleeping and living, the smoke alarm hasn't had a chance to do the job, and that technology of detecting smoke has brought no value to the saving of that life, and we have seen that repeatedly and growing in numbers over the years. So we are a fundamental, in my view, part of the Department of Health's neighbourhood model. We have a part to play. We can make a difference and we can save lives, and we're on with that and engaged with Dr. Cathy Harrison around delivery, and are engaged with the neighbourhood model, and we've got to see that increased drive towards prevention. I do not want to see another year of 14 or indeed 16 across financial year. People in Northern Ireland lose their lives, and that's that focus on prevention. There's more we need to do and more we have to do, but we cannot do it alone. We need that data. We need data sharing agreements with the trusts. We need to work with the carers, and we're on with all. There's nothing I'm saying to you that we're not decided on and not doing, but I think it's important to the committee recognises the breadth of the role of the Fire and Rescue Service and how important it is to have a properly funded, effective Fire and Rescue Service delivering across not only response, because that's always the window that people see, but prevention, protection, resilience and response.
Really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We've already been through a lot of the sort of areas that I wanted to go into. Chair, you'd mentioned Maggie's call, and certainly as somebody who represents East Antrim, that is a very, very important part. The Glens is a very rural area, and people there do worry about being able to have response times as quickly as possible. So I commend the Carnock Firefighters for taking that up, taking it forward, and saving 2 lives. Responded 22 times, and there's 2 lives that who would...
To be clear, that was in the first 3 years. There've been further response since that.
So, as a cardiac nurse, the time to defibrillation is critical. And if you can get out and deliver CPR and defibrillate, you are saving people's lives, even buying them that time until other services can arrive. So I really commend that. I'm very glad to hear that the working group has been stepped up, and hopefully that will be progressed. I wanted to ask you just about the Learning and Development College as well. It's somewhere I've been able to visit, and I think it's a fantastic facility. Certainly I've seen up close and personal some of the scenarios that you train for, and the ship and the building fire, and it's incredibly educational to see how quick a very, very developed fire can progress, and some of the scenarios that your firefighters will be going into. So to be able to train safely in that type of facility really is, I could say, is priceless. Just how is that progressing at the minute?
Yeah, it's progressing really well, but it's not without its challenges. It's a significant investment in Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service by the Department of Health and indeed by the Executive as a flagship capital project, not only in Fire and Rescue Service today, but tomorrow and in its future and its people. I say this frequently when I talk to people or talk about the college. Firefighters of tomorrow, today and tomorrow, will be better than I have been. And they'll be better than I have been across my career because of that facility. Because of our ability to align with operational guidance, national operational guidance, to translate that into a curriculum and a syllabus for firefighters, and to train, assess and maintain the skills of our firefighters across that wide range of operational incidents we're speaking to today. But equally and also very importantly across the prevention skill sets, the protection skill sets, the children and young people engagement, to drive a society which doesn't face the scourge of fire and all of the incidents we see, because we've got downstream and stopped that happening in the first place. Our focus is on prevention. The college is an exceptional facility. It's a large capital project, and accepting that it was previously a policing prison capital build, and there were timelines in that moving forward. We delivered it on time from our business case approval. We delivered it largely on budget, subject to inflationary impacts that were in place, so they need to be taken into consideration in that, and we absolutely delivered it on quality. It's an exceptional facility, and I have to take my hat off to the contractor, who we've worked very closely with. I have brief committee in the briefing paper provided to around that capital project, and that there was an extension to the defects liability period and then a further brief subject extension. We've worked really well with the contractor, and we expect to be closing that down in the last days of May to a close and reaching settlement around those defects that remain, and they're a very small number on what's a very large capital build. I believe it's been a very successful project which will deliver not only today but for Northern Ireland and for the years to come. The challenges I talk to, we don't yet fully understand the costs of running the college. It is still quite new. There is constantly changing national operational guidance that impacts the manner, nature and scale of firefighter training, which may require additional days. And we've talked about a number of those incident types today and emerging technologies. So our need to continue to train firefighters comes at additional cost, and we need to understand that. Some of the facilities in any new capital build, with inflation and all that comes, particularly over the last couple of years, continue to add cost. In some of those cases you need to run those facilities to understand specifically there are a range of gas prop fires across the site. There's a state-of-the-art water facility to meet our statutory duty under the emergencies order, and running those is going to take some time to deliver. We also have some challenges around resourcing. We've run a number of recruitment processes to resource the college, but we have in effect moved from a training model which was Belfast-centric for all of my career and much before that, to a new state-of-the-art college which is located in the heart of the province. It means that everybody has more access to it as opposed to it being in the east of the province. However, that has had an impact as well on staff, and it was an impact that we knew and foresaw was coming, but there will be a period of working through that as those who were in the college and lived this side of Northern Ireland potentially finish their time and move back on their watches or indeed retire, and those who are more central move into the college, and we're working through that. And I think we've 12 to 14 just recently through a process who are going in the next couple of weeks. So there's very positive light at the end of that window, if you want, but it'll take some time just to bring that through and upskill those trainers as well. So it's not without challenge, but it's a large capital project. It's a change, and indeed it's a change in culture of how we train, how we deliver and assess. So it's going really well, and we have a group established now, a strategic group around a target operating model for the college, which brings in the members' comment around Peace Plus and Shared Island, our target operating model, what capacity have we to work with other agencies. We have an MOU with the ambulance service established, and they've been using the facility. We've asked from a number of the voluntary agencies to come and work with us, and we open our doors to that. We never respond alone. I've never responded alone. We always go together and work in collaboration. So why would we train alone? So there's a lot of work going on to recognise what I would probably say was the original vision of the Tri-Service College, that we work together, train together, collaborate together, because when we go out there to have our best day, we're best when we do it together.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to come down and see it. It really is very impressive.
And at any time if committee would want to return, I would open that invitation.
My next question is just about health and two particular issues. Mental health support for firefighters who I know attend quite distressing incidents at times, and what level of mental health support is there for them? And the other issue then would be cancer. Now, you had mentioned quite concerningly that firefighting is seen as a carcinogenic profession, which is quite a strong term to be using. And what screening is there available for firefighters? And obviously early detection is key in order to be able to treat cancers, and particularly obviously lung cancer would be the one that you would be concerned about, but I'm sure there's other cancers as well.
There will be. Tabitha, you want to cover some of the provision first?
The mental health. After every major incident or any incident, there is a critical incident stress management programme that is undertaken with watches that have gone out or particular incidents that have happened, where fully trained officers will go in and speak with the watch and deal with whatever has happened at the watch, and those are fully trained to do so. In addition to that, we also have Lena, which formerly known as Inspire, I think, and have just recently changed their name, and opportunities to link in with them. We also have access to the Firefighters charity, which provide a fabulous service for firefighters with very specific and bespoke opportunities to undertake not only physical recuperation but also mental health recuperation. And we would also, through our health provider, have access to psychiatrists, and that primarily is the route by which we would manage our firefighters and all of our staff, support staff as well, mental health capabilities.
Glad to hear that, thank you.
Okay. And I would add just, Mr. Donnelly, in relation to the cancer piece, I think that health concordat that we spoke about at the start is a very important piece, along with the work alongside and with the Fire Brigades Union around the contaminants and working. The biggest single impact I think we can have there is changing behaviours and trying to de-risk and mitigate the risks of the occupation through good procedures, good policy, breathing apparatus at fires, decontamination, following national operational guidance, which has been designed specifically with this in mind, that when a firefighter exits a fire, there's a specific procedure even to remove the breathing apparatus, remove the PPE, bag the PPE, launder the PPE, take that away where that's required. The final point you made there around screening and monitoring of that, in line with that health concordat and working alongside that now, we are watching how that develops. We're not there yet in terms of cancer screening. I'm not a medical professional, and we need to speak to a medical professional specifically around that. However, guidance suggests that you would need to start that at point of career. You need to scan from the start. Which cancers would you be checking for? So we're working right through that process to identify where we will fall in the health concordat. Our sponsor branch in the department are aware of that, and we look forward to doing everything and continuing to work to ensure the health and safety of our firefighters.
I'm very glad to hear it. One last question, if the chair permits. 14.5% increase year on year. Why? What's the?
There are a number of issues. There has been an increase in fires, and it's not a Northern Ireland trend alone. It's a national trend. Some of that has been over multiple years across the sector. Probably a focus on response, reduced prevention, some hollowing out of back office roles, whereby prevention perhaps hasn't got the attention. That ultimately leads to increased response. We have also seen some growth in areas that Mr McGrath raised around waste fires. I think 2021 we had 12, last year we had 37. The wildfires, whilst last year figures were down somewhat in wildfires, the other significant increase in those figures, and I'd asked that just a number of weeks ago around what specifically. In some cases, they've been those special service calls, road traffic collisions, entrapments, people and machinery, and there has been an increase, and we talked about it already today from the Maggie's Call context, but there's also an increased number of calls that we're attending as a result of requests from the ambulance service. So there are a range of issues across all of that, but those are the key categories of which those increased calls fall into.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Diane?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We've covered an enormous amount of stuff. We heard yesterday Liam Kelly from the police officers talk about numbers and the need to recruit more. Do you want to comment on that in relation to both the full-time and the on-call firemen?
I would welcome that, thank you. Our headcount for full-time firefighters would be 855. We currently have 845, with 26 of those in the college at the minute. So it leaves us around 820 out there operational with a gap. There's some overtime cost around filling those gaps, but we would want to work towards a whole-time headcount of 855. That includes those who are in prevention teams, protection teams, the principal officer cohort, our operational guidance teams, day duty posts, and operational firefighters on whole-time stations, predominantly across Belfast and in the larger market towns. In the on-call, that's a slightly different picture. Our establishment there would be 994, and we are around 55 to 60 short of where we'd want to be. I think not bring focus to the whole time and trying to maintain that headcount in a difficult budget condition, because it's really important we maintain it. It takes around 20 weeks to train a whole-time firefighter, get them through their basic training and get them out onto a station where they're no longer supernumerary counted in the actual participating and headcount as in a contribution and out of training. But they're not competent at that stage. They have a full 3-year programme then to reach competence and bring those skill sets. In the on-call world, then that is even more challenging, because again, on-call firefighters have that primary employment. They're giving up so much of their time. They don't have 20 weeks to step away into initial training, or indeed 10 or 12 weeks. So they come in and they complete an initial 10, 12 days of initial training. It's basic skills, ladders, pumps, which they become, and the terminology we use is safe to ride. So they're therefore then safe to start attending their drill nights in their local towns and stations, and they're starting to mobilise, but they can't wear breathing apparatus, they can't mobilise to road traffic collisions and operate the equipment. They're not enhanced casualty care trained, they don't have all of the skills that they require. They're under strict supervision with their local watch commanders, crew commanders, and indeed the rest of their crew. So the impact of that is that fire appliances on-call stations, and they're marked, we will see them. I was in Newton Ards Station on Tuesday evening at their drill night and spent some fantastic time with them. A really good crew. And there were 4 firefighters in the line with their fire helmet on and a green triangle on it. And that identifies them to me and to the fireground and to larger incidents as someone who doesn't have the skill sets. So we have around 100 at the minute out there who are not trained in some of the basic skills of firefighting, and that's a significant number, and it does have an impact. And the impact of that can be that when we mobilise to a house fire or a person's reported house fire, we would have a predetermined attendance for a house fire of 2 pumping appliances. We would have a predetermined attendance for a person reported call of 3 pumping appliances, and the mobilising system is built like that with incident types. But when we mobilise and those skill sets aren't there, the first responding crew are identifying to the control room that they have X number of breathing apparatus works or X number of skill sets for that, and the control room then are potentially mobilising other fire appliances to that end. Now, if I had all of the money that I would want in the budget to deliver that, I still have, that's not necessarily the answer. I would welcome that in delivery, but equally then I must work with those firefighters to find a suitable time for them to be able to complete that training. The initial breathing apparatus course now is 2 days short of a full 3 weeks for them. So it's 2 days of breathing apparatus, compartment fire training in extensive temperatures, and then an assurance day which they demonstrate. And that's a really difficult thing for on-call firefighters to deliver. So it is a challenge to deliver, not just from a budgetary position, but from an organisational logistics and delivery position in a college with state-of-the-art facilities that we've talked about already, and some pressure on trainers to do that. We have a plan in place to work through that, and significant progress has been made. But when we bring in another cohort of 25 or 30, you're back into that cycle, and it can take some time to get through that. One specific example, which is probably sets the context of that, and this is, it's not unique, but it's not the norm. We've one that was brought to my attention by the assistant chief, who was on a station on Monday night. I was in Orange on Tuesday night, and he spent time with them. And we've one on-call firefighter there, quite recently joined, but his day primary occupation is as a teacher, and he can't take leave during the year because he's a teacher. And that's perfectly reasonable. So to support and develop the skill sets of that firefighter, we would need to run those courses across the summer months to do that. So those are some of the challenges we're working with in the development of on-call firefighters. I said at the start, that they're an exceptional group of people. They do not let us down. They're there and turn out all the time. And I can't commend them enough for what they give to communities. They are the chief fire and rescue officer in their towns.
Yes, and rightly so. Yes, and I live in Banbridge, and Jonathan McKinstry is one of those people who's given a lifetime to the fire service in the area. In terms of the on-call firefighters, is there any areas in particular where you have a greater shortage than others, or a greater number of people who may be in training but not finished training? And again, like in Banbridge, we only have an on-call, we don't have a full-time service. And so just really to try to tease out, are there areas that you're worried about, and are there areas that potentially need more attention than others in relation to, well, I suppose really in relation to both the full-time and, although the full-time doesn't seem to be quite as in the same position as the on-call firefighters.
So if I could take the full-time, and you may wish to come in on this as well, Tabitha. If we take the full-time first of all, it's not because the number today is closer to 855, but it is a constant move of trying to get the number to the right place, working within an affordable budget. And look, that's the world we live in, and I understand that, and we must live in that space, but it's getting them in at the right time in the year to manage affordability so you can get them back out, because we're managing 20 weeks. And trying to manage an overtime budget as people come through 20 weeks or indeed don't come in. So you're always trying to get to the headcount that delivers an efficient and effective fire and rescue service, but you're doing that in the management of a budget. And that's the life of public sector, and that's the role of myself as the Chief Fire Officer and Accountant Officer. We must manage that. The whole time is currently not as big an issue for us, you're right to say that. The on-call is slightly different. We've advertised in the last number of months 24 of those stations. We have a further 36 that we're looking at now in terms of advertisement. So we've had a really effective campaign with 530, just short of 530 applications across those 24 stations. And some of them were extensive. There was one station where I understand we had 70 applicants, which is exceptional. But we have another station where we had no applicants. And we've run 4 recruitment processes in the last number of years.
And do you have a rationale for why that is the case? Like, why would, I don't know, one place attract?
So it's larger towns and villages set against very small local rural communities, where the nature of an on-call firefighter is they have to live and work very close to the station within 5 minutes to be able to turn out. Therefore, if you drew an isochrone around that station location, it's a relatively, in some cases, very
small number of people.
Yes. So the pool of candidates is limited in that sense. And the nature of our occupation, we need to, at time of call, mobilise very quickly to respond. So we're looking across all of that. We're working nationally with the National Fire Chiefs Council. There's a report recently published across the UK Fire and Rescue Service sector around the challenges of the on-call system in general. And we're looking at how we might do that. Is there a rationale to extend that 5 minutes? Would it work in certain areas? How many homes or businesses would that bring in? But the campaign here has been really successful, but there are a number of stations we know are down to much smaller numbers, and we may well go back out with them in September. And Tabitha, who has responsibility for people and culture and resourcing, is now looking and analysing which stations and where those are in terms of what will go back out.
What do you find really is the issue on population trends and social implications? You know, the sort of Generation Z are making different choices. The on-call firefighter, as the Chief has referred to, requires huge commitment. It has a huge impact on your family life. It's a huge impact on your working life. So it does require, and I think initially people think when they see the contract terms, etc., that they get paid, for example, for 90 hours when they only get paid when they turn out. So sometimes it's just trying to manage people's expectations, but primarily because we are recruiting in rural areas and we are seeing those sort of social and population trends happening, it is significantly difficult and challenging. However, we have seen such success with some other areas, as the Chief has said, in the larger villages and towns that have attracted a higher application rate. And our recent outreach really did see a huge increase. I think it was something like a 300% increase in applications from the campaign before. So, but it's just not quite in the places that we require. So we're going to have to analyse that to see what that means and what within the boundaries of our service delivery that we can do to affect that and make a difference.
I think that that's hugely important. I mean, I watched a thing in the news recently about like generations of firefighters in Newry.
Yes.
And really their contribution was like unbelievable to the community in general, but it just takes such dedication, and they seem to think, well, that's just what we do. And it was really quite
amazing family.
It was an amazing family. So in terms of rurality, because that is an issue, and it is a pressing issue, and it's one we hear about in this committee more and more in terms of health care delivery, palliative care delivery, whatever it is. Will you be able to take specific measures to try to alleviate that, you know, maybe need for more on-call firefighters? Or I'm not asking you to explain it all here, but will you be sort of focusing on that so that those kind of rural towns, villages, you know, small areas, dispersed population will be able to avail of the service?
Let me take
you take the first bit now.
Absolutely. So probably there's two things there, and the first thing is that today in some of those stations where there's not that level of availability, there's an assurance there for members, indeed for the public, around our availability, and I'm content to provide that assurance that we may have a number of fire appliances off the run today because of on-call firefighters not being available, but we have a response. Our control room dynamically mobilise. They don't just do that at the point of time at which a call comes in. They move resources across the province to where there are gaps. They'll move whole-time resources from Belfast or from other whole-time stations. They'll move standby appliances where they need to do that when activity is busy and we're in operational spate, perhaps with wildfire and other areas. So in our control room we can see that resource picture and we know where to mobilise to. From a recruitment process, absolutely. I say the plan this year had been 24 and then 36 later in the year. We've discussed that just earlier this week with the Assistant Chief who's responsible for Community Protection Service Delivery, and with the Director of People and Culture, with Tabitha here, around revising that 36 stations to look at which of those are critical risk to get back and recruit. So there's absolutely a plan there.
Just my last question, because I'm conscious, Chair, we spent a long time in this, I mean, we all remember all the what is it, thumbs up on whatever
Yes.
day it was, you know, the campaigns, because it is quite alarming that you're saying that last year, did I take this down right, 16 people died because of a non-functioning or an issue around a smoke alarm. Are we looking at doing kind of the kind of education campaigns? You do fantastic education campaigns locally. I mean, when my son and daughter were in GB and BB, the visit to the fire station was a huge, big thing in the year, and you know, they found out about firefighters and all the rest of it. It was fantastic. But it seems to me that I don't think I've seen those campaigns lately, or maybe they are there and I haven't. I don't know. But I just think that the smoke alarm one that's significant, isn't it?
It is, and it's a very good question. So to be clear, the 14 people in calendar year and 16 in financial year didn't lose their lives specifically because the smoke alarm wasn't there, wasn't working, but they were nonetheless lost lives in domestic property fires. Right. Some of them may have had smoke alarms, but the call didn't come to us quickly enough, or we weren't there in time, or the fire developed very quickly, but they were vulnerable people, they couldn't get out. So there are a range of causes. What I would say is that a very large percentage of those people were within what we define as our people at risk category. They were over the age of 50. They had poor mobility. They were known to another agency, which is key in terms of how you make a difference and how you reach out and collaborate to identify them. Or they had alcohol or in some cases drug dependencies. So there's 4 categories there. And the prevention campaigns for that then are far-reaching and wide in how we try to address that. So we did complete in the region of 5,000, slightly less this last year than the year before, but only minimally so, home fire safety checks, where firefighters turn out and go to people's homes and complete that.
I've got them done.
We will fit smoke alarms where they're required in those homes for vulnerable people who meet the category of people at risk. We are in every primary school, primary 5 every year, and we talk to the children there, and we've been doing that for around 26 years now. So every person who's over any age who's come through P5 has had that input around good behaviours and bad behaviours of fire. We engage with youth schemes, we go to the BB and different courses to deliver. So we have an extension prevention department doing a lot of work. It is a department within the service that's not currently properly resourced, and that's about headcount and getting people in and trying to deliver. So it is without doubt a challenge. The specific advertising that you're speaking about would be the next level up, in that it would be media, television, radio, and it needs to be specifically designed to be referred to as campaign advertising, and there's a significant cost to that. There has been a taking away of the ability to do that in recent years. We have engaged again with sponsor branch and department to support the ability to do that. But that again all would be an additional budget, an additional requirement, and it's not budget that we have readily available. It's for us to look at that and work through, and again we've engaged with sponsor branch around what the level of spend might be, but media and television are extremely expensive, and we must now look at what the audience is, who we're trying to reach, who listens to which radio shows, are those the vulnerable people, because the world has moved on in social media and how people engage.
Even for young people,
and how you reach those specific vulnerable people.
How do you get that? Can I just ask one last question? If you sparked something that came to my attention yesterday. When someone is discharged from hospital and that person is has got very poor mobility, is maybe going into a downstairs room, etc., etc., is the issue of a functioning smoke alarm or the ability to alert people to a problem, is that specifically part of the discharge?
That's the piece in which I'm saying, and working with the department on and engage with them around the neighbourhood model, that I think we can do more and do better. We have partnered very recently with one of the training providers for the trusts. We're looking at how we build in our messaging to the training given to carers and to trust staff. We do a lot of that. There's a specific piece in Belfast called the Safer Together project, which needs to extend and needs to grow, where we support our messages and delivery too. It's not a specific part, I believe, and I need to get the detail around that, Mrs. Dodds, but it's where we think we should go, and it's through. I don't have the capacity in our firefighters to go and do that on every occasion, but there's a really clear collaborative approach through shared data and enabled digital and data-driven fire and rescue service that puts that in place and allows partnership sharing, that if there's a check on a home or a discharge process, that's exactly where I want to get to. That we're using the data of those people who are coming out of hospital in the shift left model to get in and do that work. To prevent those fatalities, and indeed those are the fatality figures. There are significant other injuries and casualties, which all make a significant investment, drive economic and social value, prevent people going back into hospital. We have a contribution to make in the moves that the Minister is trying to make in relation to improving the health system.
Thank you. It's just, I think maybe something as a committee we'll discuss. I met some GPs yesterday concerned about the safety of discharge. And that just adds another layer to it that I hadn't thought about as well. So, yeah, no, thank you very much. And thank you to all the firefighters out there who do keep us safe and who race to help us at accidents and so on. I live off the A1 and I see them working regularly.
Yes.
On that. So, thank you. And a huge thank you from us here for everything.
Alan Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. Just to echo, it's good to see you again, Aidan and Tabitha. Thank you for the invite that we had back last year. It was very enlightening and thoroughly enjoyable. I think just as Diane, just to pick up from Diane, I think it's really important that on behalf of us all in this committee that we do thank those personnel who, at a time in which people are running away from a fire, your staff are running towards a fire. And I think it's very important that this committee relay on our thanks in a very public way to those very brave personnel that I'm sure that you're very proud to call colleagues. A lot of the areas have been covered today, as people have been talking. I have ticked asked, so I'm kind of running out of questions here. Just picked up on the piece whereby you cite where you require some improvements to the digital infrastructure. I wonder if you could maybe explain a bit more on that, Aidan. I mean, obviously you've got an advanced new training facility. I assume that does not apply to that, but this is in the wider context. And what kind of investment are you talking about to improve the digital infrastructure within Northern Fire Service?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and it's really helpful and very relevant. I mentioned earlier today, I think it was Chair and Mr. Donnelly asked, and I referenced the HMI report. That was His Majesty's Fire Service Inspector Scotland who conducted that on behalf of the department at the request of the department at that time. It was very welcomed by Fire and Rescue Service. We had 9 recommendations from that, again all very welcomed and what we needed to deliver. I won't go through all of them today, but one of them was absolutely around a sea change and step forward in the digital and data capability of our organisation. We have systems that were, let me say it this way, we're not coming from 2010 or nor indeed 2000. In many cases we're coming from the 80s and the 90s, and that's the place in which we are starting from. We have a plan, we have a digital data and technology strategy now. It's been an extensive piece of work, but we don't have the financial budget envelope, we don't have the staff capacity, we don't have those skills within the organisation. We've done some work with our infrastructure. Work is outsourced to BSO ITS, and they've done a fantastic job with us over recent years in delivering that. It's probably around 9 years now that's been done, and a lot of advancements been made with BSO ITS. So I welcome that, and we're not in the place we were a number of years ago. However, we have a number of core organisational systems: our command and control mobilising solution, our learning management system, our payroll, our finance, our HR, data and personnel, our crew and payments, which require a significant step forward. They're all different in the level of investment they take, but they're significant costs. Some of that will be capital. Some of it, because they're now cloud-based systems, are no longer capital, they're now revenue spent, which create challenge. But in many cases, and I used an example yesterday with one of our board committees, we've talked today with Mr McGrath and indeed Mr Donnelly about the wildfires, and the request and need to respond to FOIs and indeed AQWs from yourselves committee members around that, and rightly so that we are held to account and scrutinised on behalf of the public, requires extensive work in paper-based archaic systems to pull together that data. Firefighters who respond to calls are still filling in the paper-based systems that I saw when I joined the fire service in 1995, and that's a long time. And some of that paperwork is then in triplicate and duplicate, and it's returned and taken to the wages team, and they're inputting that data. That's not effective and it's not efficient. So it's that ask, and not of this committee, but for us in partnership and working with the Department of Health, and we are doing that. But it is a very difficult financial window. We've had support for our payroll system, and I'm really pleased to say that across the last 12 months, we've opened that project, procured that system, ran that over 12 months, and on the 1st of April, that new system went live. And we can see huge improvements already. We are still, however, bringing the paper in to put into that new system. There's a accruing and payment system which is currently with the department for approval of business case, and we're at, I hope, final stages of that, and they're working with us in support of that. So there's a really positive relationship with the department and our sponsor branch. There's a recognition of the challenges that we face. There's a working across that. We have a paper currently at final stages that went through one of our committees yesterday, and we'll go to board next week, around resource for data and digital support. It's around 16 posts to try to understand, because the system's great, but the data going into the system is essential. And to deliver an effective fire and rescue service, we must and need to be using data, using evidence, using partnership agreements, using data sharing agreements with indeed those trusted Mrs Dodds has referenced, to identify those people who are most vulnerable in our community, using NISRA data, using all of that to inform where our resources are, where we might be able to make savings, what our response model looks like, to ensure that we have the right resources and the right people in the right place at the right time to support an effective response. So we've work to do with digital and data, there's no question.
And in terms of those pieces of digital infrastructure that you feel are lacking, in terms of the investment in that, are you talking many, many millions? The department is aware of that, many millions?
We are, and they are aware, and I won't sit and or can't sit here today and say that they're not supporting us. They're aware of the risk, they're aware of the HMI recommendations. It's not optional, it's vital, was the actual words used by the HMI inspector. His terminology was, with the right financial and political support, we can deliver that. There was much more in the comment there, some of it's in the briefing paper today, but we are working with the department, and incrementally we are making those improvements. I want to deliver service improvement. I want the fire and rescue service to be effective and efficient. I wanted to do everything that I talked about at the start here today, and like everyone in public life, there's a window in which you can achieve that. We've done so much work in the organisation around stabilising the workforce. Developing that workforce is the next part that needs to come along. Leadership training, and with that needs to come the digital acumen, in order that people can use those digital systems intelligently and properly, so that we're efficient and making best use of public money. Because I would be really content to come back here at any time to be held to account on what we're doing, but it's particularly difficult with systems that are so old and antiquated to do that.
Can you just maybe take us back an hour or more from the references made to the wildfires and rural arson? Sometimes we need to call it out for what it is. Is there the ability for the Northern Ireland Fire Service to call upon additional support for, in the, say for example, where there is a large scale fire or multiple fires that is hampering your ability to attend other critical incidents nearby? Can you call upon additional support? Say for example, can you call upon the Army to come in? Like for, I believe that is what applies over in England. Am I correct in saying that?
It would be very unusual for that to happen in England.
However,
our mutual aid arrangements in relation to fire are mostly capability based, and when I say that, there's specific things like high volume pumping, hazardous materials.
Helicopters?
Helicopters, we have a protocol in place whereby we can, through the Foreign Commonwealth, through the Irish Army, reach out and request that assistance there. But it's something that comes up frequently in relation to wildfires. When we see wildfire, and I heard reference recently wildfire tourism, where people go to see that and then they ask about helicopters. Probably useful to clarify that firefighting helicopters are a very specific type. They're not the standard Eurocopter type approach you see. They need to carry a bucket with water below them. It needs to be able to be released from the helicopter. It carries around 750 millilitres to 1,000 litres, so it's about a tonne of water. It has to have a water source close by and close to the fire from which it can be lifted and taken. As soon as you lift, the water is leaking until you get, and you still need firefighters in proximity to. So aerial firefighting with helicopters is not the panacea of all things wildfire, and it isn't always the case. And equally, those very conditions that we talked about for wildfire, when we have those conditions here, we will also have them in other areas of the UK, and therefore those assets are very often in use.
It's not the fireman Sam type of outcome that my child used to watch on TV.
It's certainly not the firefighter's answer to
Absolutely.
everything that answers, and I understand that the perception of why it might be. It doesn't deliver the outcomes we need from a tactical firefighting perspective.
Aidan and Tabitha, thank you for all you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you to your personnel.
Alan Chambers.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'd like to join in with the appreciation and thanks, Aidan, that others have given you and your staff, your service that we hope we never need. But when we do need you, it's very reassuring to see the fire engine and the blue lights charging down the street towards our emergency. So thank you very much for that. In terms of Maggie's call, it's obviously we're still in the baby step stage of it, but the data that you've given is really, really positive and shows that it is a successful model and there is a need for it. But and I can understand the caution that was initially and maybe still been expressed by the Firefighters Union. But looking away down the line and staring into a crystal ball, if you have one, the model in America, my understanding is that firefighters would attend local medical emergencies, not just like cardiac arrest, but all sorts, somebody stabbed, shot, whatever. They would be the first responders. Do you ever see that a way down the line becoming a feature of the fire service?
I certainly don't in the anytime near future. I'm
not calling for it, by the way.
No, absolutely. I need to be really clear. First of all, on the Fire Brigades Union, they have been extremely supportive, albeit that there were the challenges of the early stages. Both locally and indeed nationally, they've been extremely supportive of having the conversations to move this forward, Maggie's call, in the right way. And it's through careful consideration and I hope consultation, negotiation and hopefully collective bargaining, we get to the right place with Maggie's call. That will take some more time yet, but we're going the right way. In relation to some of those wider pieces of what the firefighters' role map's fairly clear, and I think today I've probably articulated the breadth of that role, the skill sets and competence required across that range of not just existing but emerging technologies, the preventative role, that wider role for us in schools with children and young people, with vulnerable adults, in partnership working with the Civil Contingencies Group through the Executive Office. It's such a broad role that to add some of those other on it, my fear in that would be that ultimately you become actually not professionally competent at anything, but mobilised to a bit of everything. And that's not the place I would want our service to be. We require, and the people of Northern Ireland deserve, a professional fire and rescue service that is the most efficient and effective in all of its systems, processes and people, and indeed its leadership in people who are developed. And we require them to be good at the things we need them to do, which is clearly defined within our statutory duties. I hear that question frequently around. I don't think we ever need to be paramedics. The ambulance service need to do that, and they equally should be properly funded and resourced to deliver their statutory duties. They're a key partner for us, and they're exceptional as well.
You're talking there about the on-call firefighters, and they have to live within 5 minutes of the station. What what's the sort of minimum crew that you would have on a plans before you leave the station to go to an emergency? Is there if you had only 4 people turned up because others were in the bath or whatever and didn't get there in time, will you head with a minimum, or do you wait till you have a full crew?
We will go with a minimum crew of 4. That number is correct. We will not go with 3. 3 does not deliver a safe system of work, and there's a very clear reason around that. Very quickly and at high level, when you arrive at the door of a house fire, if you arrive with 3 people, you need 2 people to enter wearing breathing apparatus to work together. They must have an entry control officer. The fire plants needs a driver and pump operator to provide, and there should be an incident commander. So in an ideal world, we would have 5 and potentially 6 in on-call environments. The only occasion we would let them go with 3 is when there's a second appliance coming, and that appliance has reached a place whereby they'll arrive with them to deliver a safe system of work. Public safety and community safety is really important to us, but equally firefighter safety is paramount and must be in my thinking.
Just a quick story, Dan alluded to Thumbs Up on Monday. We all remember that campaign. But it's maybe 25 years ago, North Downborough Council had an exchange with Virginia Beach Fire Service, and they were absolutely impressed with the Thumbs Up because they have a lot of wooden houses and people were taking batteries out of their alarms and stuff. So they unashamedly adopted your campaign at the time with an American accent. But I think in exchange, they give your officers at the time a couple of places in their specialised training facility. It was Brian Galt at the time was, and they trained a couple of your officers to become trainers in specialised operations, which I see your guys now constantly doing, water-based and stuff, maybe what they didn't do before. So that relationship did bear fruit, both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. We took a lot of time there. I didn't want to interrupt any of that because I think it's important that everybody got to ask the questions they want and that you got to say all the things that you needed to say in terms of the fire and rescue service and the work that you are doing. So appreciate you coming and appreciate all of that. And we maybe should take a quick poll of who all here remembers the Thumbs Up and the
Sir, it is now Tested Tuesday, so it was rebranded as Tested Tuesday.
Well, I really Thumbs Up on Monday will always stick in my head. Thumbs Up on Monday. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you to the committee on behalf of Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service. I would reiterate very quickly, if I could, just in closing, it is a privilege to do the job that I do, simply because of the people that I have. They are absolutely exceptional. I will take back the comments of the committee here today to those people. We are privileged to have those people and to work in partnership with the department to continue to deliver our services. It's a fantastic job, an amazing organisation, and we're here to deliver.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, members, just moving on then to the 8th item on our agenda, which is a briefing from the Law Society here on the Mental Capacity Act. So can I refer everybody to page 90 of the main pack? And we'll just welcome our delegation.
He even frightens me.
I'm just going to welcome Claire McNamee, Conveyancing and Non-Contentious Business Lead within the Law Society, John O'Prey, Murlands Solicitor, Michael Graham, Cleaver, Fulton, Rankin Solicitors, and Julianne Osborne, CMG, Cunningham, Dickey Solicitors. So you are all very, very welcome. Thank you. Apologies. We had a lot of questions for the Fire and Rescue Service, so that probably went on longer than you were expecting, so apologies for that. Thanks for waiting on us. So just going to hand over to yourselves for brief introductory remarks, and then we'll go straight to questions from members.
No problem. We welcome this opportunity to appear before this committee today to talk about the Mental Capacity Act from a legal practice perspective, particularly where non-contentious work is involved. but there are provisions about criminal justice. I'm Claire McNamee, the Conveyancing and Non-Contentious Business Lead. I'm joined by John, Michael and Julianne, all partners in their respective law firms and members of the Non-Contentious Business Committee for the Society. We obviously have submitted a paper to this committee beforehand, and today we want to take the chance to stress just how important it is to implement the Mental Capacity Act as soon as possible, especially now that we're 10 years from its assent. The only provisions that are in place are deprivations of liberty, but there's no comfort, even 5 years on from when they were enacted, that the safeguards are coming fairly soon. At present, if someone has a mental health condition termed a mental disorder under the current law, it's presumed to have no capacity. By contrast, the Mental Capacity Act requires that capacity is considered for every decision and that all practical help and support is given to help a person make their decisions. These principles encourage personal autonomy, and that's key to empower vulnerable people. It's especially important for people whose capacity can fluctuate. We do note the correspondence from the Health Minister following engagement by this committee and also to ourselves directly that these principles are actively considered, but these are on a should basis rather than a must basis, and formal implementation is the only way to provide this. This would help not only the healthcare professionals but also solicitors and the courts whenever they're looking at capacity issues. I'm going to just briefly consider the aspects from our letter in the remaining time. So independent advocates are seen by legislators as a key safeguard. This is clear from their inclusion in the ongoing Adult Protection Bill. This also plans for phased implementation despite the issues with the delay in implementing the Mental Capacity Act. The advocates are there to make sure a vulnerable person has support, and that support reflects what their wishes are. There's no legal grounding for this in the revised Code of Practice, but without enacting the advocates, the vulnerable person's voice is lost. Lasting powers of attorney are envisaged for both property and care, where in the existing system it's only for financial matters. There's no provisions to allow a person to appoint an attorney to deal with health matters. Advanced directives that we have are only for medical treatment where death is imminent. With lasting powers of attorney, again the difference is the principles help support a person make the decisions. That talks about their finances and also their care. We understand that these can't be implemented because there's no budget to establish the Office of Public Guardian. In relation to the Office of Public Guardian, Part 6 and 7 talk about not only establishing the office, but also the appointment of deputies. We understand that there's a lot of work and resources needed to be able to even consider what the costs are of implementing this, and that's not exactly encouraging in terms of the likelihood of this happening fairly quickly. 10 years on, the Act needs to be implemented and there can't be any more delay. It's very clear, the recent census says that the population's ageing. A recent health survey found that 44% of people between 65 and 74 aren't in good health, and statistics from the Alzheimer's Society indicates that 1 in 3 born today will develop dementia in their lifetime. We want to make sure that these systems are in place to support those who are most vulnerable, especially where capacity is concerned, to provide those safeguards, but also to promote their dignity and autonomy. We do have real concerns about this partial implementation, and particularly we're watching that coming across with the Adult Protection Bill. These are laws that are intended to protect the most vulnerable, but there's no guarantees themselves of any funding to put these protections in place. We've mentioned in our paper, and we've discussed these issues from our legal perspective, about these principles, independent advocates, powers of attorney and the Office of Public Guardian. And we're just highlighting the risk that the delay means that these safeguards look as if they're being deprioritised, and the measures that deprive liberty are implemented ahead of the safeguards. You've probably all heard it from your constituents. You probably maybe know somebody or have a family member that doesn't have capacity. So from a human perspective, we really think we need to prioritise these measures to support and uphold the dignity of those people, and we would prefer sooner rather than later. But thanks for your time. We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. That has been useful in terms of your last point about the importance of prioritising the issues that you're raising. What kind of engagement have you had with the department, and where's that sitting?
Really, it's whenever we ask for updates, so we've sent recent correspondence to both the Justice and Health Ministers. Before that, we had a contact within the Department for Justice, and they just kind of say, we're still keeping it under review. We kind of went back over the questions in the Assembly that have been raised over the last period of time, and a lot of basically the stock answer is it's a very complicated act, it's very long, there's a lot of provisions, and we don't have the funding to do the planning to see what resource there is needed to be able to do any implementation. So the last one we got from the Department for Justice, my contact had said, yeah, we did cost out lasting powers of attorney, but there's no money.
Right.
But there's no time scale that was
So
accompanied by that.
it has been quite limited. I mean, I suppose I think what's important for anybody in the committee that hasn't come across this issue before, the system that we have is quite outdated. So it basically regards people as being capable or incapable. It's black and white. The new system that we hope to have allows for assisted decision making. So it's about trying to support a person who lacks capacity to make a decision insofar as you can do that. And only if they're incapable do we then step in and effectively apply a best interest test. So although the Minister had indicated that, well, we still have EPAs and they're sort of the same as a financial lasting power of attorney, the systems are really very, very different indeed, and we are the only part of these islands now that does not have the assisted decision making regime. Our legislation is now 40 years old and it's just not fit for purpose.
And just in terms of that, I always think, because you mentioned us all having constituents, it's always useful to kind of put a real live sort of an example of the impact of just the scenario that you're outlining on an individual.
Well, if I can use, there is a reported judgment, they're going to laugh at me for wanting to mention my case again, but there's a reported judgment called in the matter of JG, which was came out in March. Basically, that was a case where I had a client who was subject to a controllership order. So controllership is obviously the system whereby the court has appointed somebody to manage your finances. I was then appointed as a professional controller to deal with this chap, and when I met him, I realised that he was capable of at least giving some level of instruction and intention as to the management of his affairs. So I then applied for him to be able to make an enduring power of attorney where he would have had the freedom to choose his attorneys, rather than be stuck with a court-appointed controller. That resulted in me having to go to the High Court to get the judgment from Mr Justice Humphreys to allow that to happen. At the first instance decision with the Master of the Office of Care and Protection, she actually said to me the words, well, Mr Graham, if the legislation, the Mental Capacity Act, was enforced, we would be having a very different conversation. And that is simply because if we were looking at assisted decision making, he would never have needed to go through that process at all.
Okay.
The other thing as well, we were at an event on Monday with dementia and Tuesday morning, and I'm hearing a lot of these stories from people with dementia, and they said, one of the first things the doctor said to me was, get your affairs in order, and if that's really only half your affairs, for a lot of people, like, it's peace of mind. If you're healthy, you say, listen, I don't want to go into a care home, or I don't want to do this, or if you have to do this, can you do that? It just gives that certainty that they're in control. And the same with like the finances. Yes, in practical, there's not going to be too much difference from this lasting power of attorney to what we kind of have at the minute, bar that you register it as soon as it's made. But it's more from the health and welfare kind of aspect of this. And for us, it's the principles as well. Like these principles really say, a person, don't write them off unless it's proven that, after you've given them all that you can, that there's nothing that, they can't make decisions for themselves. And there might be some things, like this person might be able to decide what place they would like to go to or what shopping they would like to do, but they just aren't able to manage the complex technical matters. And it's about trying to give that bit of dignity to somebody to say,
but even, sorry, I was going to say, at that Dementia and I event on Tuesday morning, they were saying, once you get the diagnosis, it's too late to get your EPA. And I was trying to say it's not. We can assess your capacity, but there is that perception that if Section 1 was enacted, it allows us to help them and to understand what they need, and would give them more autonomy, that they don't have to hide a diagnosis. And that's what we're finding when people come in. They try almost to hide that they've been given a diagnosis because they think we're just going to write them off. And that even Section 1 being enacted would be really helpful from our perspective on the front line, seeing clients who are at their lowest ebb, frankly. And family members have enough going on. If somebody gets a dementia diagnosis or has other mental capacity issues, that they don't need a barrier. And the Office of Care and Protection and a controllership order is extremely difficult and challenging for the normal person to understand. Some days we find it difficult to deal with, the court system in that regard. So for the normal Joe public who has a loved one that is going through a very difficult time, it just makes it worse. And I do think if there was that presumption that they do have capacity, rather than an assumption that you don't as soon as you get that diagnosis, that would massively help our older people in society. And what this concerning thing I have to say I picked up from that dementia event was so many young people in their 50s and early 60s now have dementia as well. This is not just somebody that's 85, 95 and knocking on the door of a care home. This affects so many people of so many ages. And as Claire said, most of you around this table will have a family member that may have a capacity issue at some point in time. And it is only sometimes when it lands on your own door you appreciate the hurdles that you have to go through to get to be able to deal with their finances and affairs, let alone their health and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, this is Dementia Action Week, so most of us probably were in attendance at that event. It was very stark in terms of highlight. I mean, 25,000 diagnoses of dementia here in the north. I mean, that really kind of was a number that shocked me, and obviously within an ageing population that number is just going to continue to rise. So these are very important issues, and I just want to explore the independent advocate issue, because we had a lot of deliberation with regard to the adult protection bill, and we laboured a lot on the independent advocacy, and from the committee's point of view, we think that's an absolutely vital component of it, and that's highlighted within our report and within some of the amendments that we have made. In terms of your view with regard to the workforce, the sufficiency of the workforce out there at the present, with independent advocacy, have you any concerns or issues?
I think I kind of went back over like when the Mental Capacity Act was first implemented, and they kind of did the financial kind of assessment of that, and at that point, now this is again 10 years out of date, they were saying that they thought it would be about 8 million a year to administer, but that was based on 5% of the population, and I'm not sure whether or not those stats are actually up to date as to whether or not that would reflect the level of people who would need that assistance. I think I would have concerns, because if the Adult Protection Bill then now comes in on the Mental Capacity Act with both of that, then the Mental Capacity Act will capture quite a few people who probably would overlap with the Adult Protection Bill, but also there will be outliers in both for both. And I think because we haven't really heard anything from the respective departments about how they would plan to do training, even like things in this initial financial memorandum, we're saying the training will either cost us about 4 million if we do it as part of what we already deliver, or it's going to cost us 20 million, so, and there was no in between for that. So it's really determining what the scope of this advocate's role is, and whether or not there are existing people, for example, adult social workers or whatever, that are able to administer this, and then to look at those workloads. But we wouldn't really have oversight on that.
I think, the point that you've highlighted through your presentation is, it's all well and good having legislation, but it needs to be backed up by resource, and that was something that we certainly laboured on as well. I was going to ask about what part of the Act you think needed to be implemented next, but Joanne, you've said it's Section 1.
Yeah, Section 1.
Because essentially, if Section 1 is implemented, then the courts will have to start to interpret the rest of our sort of capacity system in light of that. I mean, that's, if we sort of take it as an overriding objective, that there's a statutory presumption of capacity, and there is this attempt to assist people with their decision making, and then that would sort of help. Wouldn't be the answer long term, but I think it would help to give us some flexibility under the current system. The other thing I suppose we were thinking about in terms of the costs of the new system, the public guardian, the staff for that office, etc. Is there no overlap between what the Office of Care and Protection is currently doing, because I mean a lot of their work will be hived off to the Office of the Public Guardian. I would have thought there would be a saving on that side of the house if the work is going to be done on the other side, and whether perhaps this is something that the Office of Care and Protection could take on in the short term until a public guardian is actually appointed. Now, I don't know if that would require a change to the legislation itself, but you do have, a court office that is doing an awful lot of similar work that maybe could be expanded on.
I think, the part one is obviously the principles, and the principles in our view is by making that a must rather than a should. In our view, it's probably the most cost-effective way of making progress where it's really been at a standstill. The Office of Public Guardian really is essential, and a lot of this is impeded by that. So I suppose in terms of our preference, yes, if we could get the Office of Public Guardian, but as the what could we actually do right now, the part one would probably be.
An easy win to a certain extent would be to enact Section 1 perhaps, and that then at least starts the principles, lays the principles in legislation. A couple of judgments recently, Mr. Justice Humphreys has said there's a lacuna in the law because there is the Capacity Act is not fully enacted. So the judges are perhaps getting a bit more vocal about that as well. People are moving a lot more around the UK, and this is becoming a bigger issue as well because it can't be, the LPAs in England and Wales can't be used here in Northern Ireland, and same in Scotland and England, and between England and Wales. So that's a big issue too because people are moving about.
And that presumably could be relatively easily implemented because that is just, so at the minute the Northern Ireland system does not recognise a foreign instrument, but all of the other jurisdictions would recognise ours to some extent, greater or lesser. If we could implement the parts of the Act that allow our courts to recognise those foreign instruments, that would be excellent as well, because there's a lot of clients that we would have where they've got cross-border estates. Maybe they only have a small amount of assets in this jurisdiction, but they still have to go through the process of getting a controllership order to deal with those assets, but they maybe have a lasting power of attorney in England, for example. So I think that mutual recognition is another very key thing that shouldn't have any great cost to implement, I would hope, although costs, I suppose, are hidden in everything.
Yeah, I love the phrase easy ones. I've been about here a long time. Easy ones are never that easy to come by.
Well, that's probably true, but
I'm just going to move around then. Danny.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that. It struck me as really important because this is about people's human rights, and human rights shouldn't be optional. And you're making very, very serious restrictions to people's life and liberty. So it is obviously a very, very concerning issue. We don't want to be here, you mentioned the Adult Protection Bill, we don't want to be here in 10 years having not implemented the Adult Protection Bill in the same way that this has been. So what particular lessons do we need to take away from this, from the non-implementation of the bill, so that we're not?
My view would be, I suppose, the financial explanatory memorandum was done at that point. Now, the Mental Capacity Act, admittedly, has been hampered by the fact that the Assembly then wasn't functioning for effectively 5 of these kind of 10 years. And then when it did get back, then COVID. So there was quite a lot that are kind of in the intervening, but I think it needs to be a constant, where are we? Where are we now in terms of projections? Like, I'm pretty sure all of these figures that they said for establishing the Mental Capacity Act between 75 and 130 million for year one, 10 years later are probably significantly more. And I think there's no oversight as to, well, where are we against this, or what can we kind of, yes, I don't doubt that there are teams working on that, and I don't doubt that there's a lot of pressures all over health, but I think this is something that when these deprivations, for example, deprivation of liberties, were introduced, really it should be a priority to introduce a correspondence safeguard as well. But yeah, I don't have the answer, just probably keep checking how much is this going to cost, what can we do, what's realistic, is there anything that we can definitely ring fence, but again I appreciate financial pressures.
Thank you. Are there any legal risks associated with implementing the Adult Protection Bill without those safeguards in the same way that this has been implemented or not implemented?
Well, I think the Adult Protection Bill is probably a conversation for a whole other day, that you could get into that whole kind of thing. There's a lot in it. There's a lot that is kind of there. We did welcome, obviously, this committee's suggestion that any of these kind of investigations, example from section 5 to 8, aren't implemented without the independent advocate. But I think all of these things are, you know, you're really dealing with vulnerable people, and if you're not putting the safeguards in place to try and make these protections, there's always a legal risk. Obviously the Mental Capacity Act envisaged that because there was a set budget that was allocated for judicial reviews and legal aid challenges. So, you know, I think that's inherent in everything.
Are there any elements of the Act that could expose the Department to legal risk following on from that, particularly in terms of human rights obligations?
The Mental Capacity Act. Well, I think there's probably, well, it's kind of hard to know. You know, obviously the Mental Capacity Act, in terms of the principles, in terms of making this, there's criminal justice aspects of that, though they're not really, that wouldn't be our specialty. But I don't think, because the mental health order is still there, but it's just, it doesn't prioritise human rights. And a problem that we've discussed with our committee is the people who are likely to be impacted in relation to this either need to be very, very wealthy, or they have absolutely nothing. And if they have nothing, then they'll have to apply for legal aid, and then, you know, there might not be might not be approved for any challenge that they might take. Whereas the very wealthy might not want it to be publicised that they don't have mental capacity, or, you know, that there's issues that they're experiencing. So we don't have any kind of knowledge of any case law that's ongoing, because I think the candidates of people who would challenge that.
I suppose the only other thing to mention is I think I'm right in saying that one of the reasons why the legislation had to be updated was essentially Northern Ireland's in breach of the UK's obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we are, as I said earlier, we are really lagging behind every other part of the UK and Ireland by having this black and white sort of on and off switch. You're capable, you're incapable. You know, even arguably assisted decision making is in breach of a disabled person's rights, but it's a lot better than just saying, you, as of today's date, you are incapable. So I suppose there is and I'm not an expert on judicial reviews and that sort of thing, but I mean, I suppose that there's a risk if we just leave the system in its current broken state, you know, indefinitely.
But obviously there are cases where people's capability can fluctuate and go up and down, and we're not recognising that at all.
Right.
The UNCRPD is obviously a huge step forward for people with disabilities, and a treaty I think should be implemented here in Northern Ireland. Certainly I'm working on a private member's bill towards that effect. Can I just check one other thing, just to go back with you? The meaning of mental disorder in the Act is one of the bits that hasn't been enacted. So reading back to the 1986 Act, which I think exists here in Northern Ireland, it's the 1986 Act is quite blunt. And is that the definition that's currently being used then, or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It is.
Pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
Basically, the assumption is if you have a mental, again, the language is
no
outdated.
capacity gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that kind of presumption, whereas the Mental Capacity Act is, you know, every decision that you make, it depends on every decision, and if after you've been given all the support and you can't understand, you can't retain the information, and you can't make that decision, then you're deemed for that decision not to have capacity.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nuala?
Thank you. I'm just going to follow on directly from that last question, actually, as a supplementary. So if it was implemented, you would be deemed it subjective to each question rather than the overall issue of not being competent or not have the capacity. So might you give us an example of a person who that would come into effect? Because quite often we deal with many cases where there are adults looking after their adult children who have quite complex needs and would, for just in simplistic terms, not have capacity to make decisions in most aspects of life. So could you give an example whereby the implementation would actually be different, and what kind of persons then would interact with that?
I think my case probably again is the example, because that was an individual who, because he had been deemed incapable of managing his financial affairs, he had been essentially given a controllership order. But that didn't take account of the fact that he did have the capacity to choose somebody to manage his affairs for him. And also, it's fair to say, in this particular chap's case, he would have capacity to manage some of his finances himself. He does, for example, run his own small business, but he couldn't manage a large personal injury award, which was the problem in this case. So under the new regime, instead of us having to go to court to battle for him to have that right, it would have been in black and white in the legislation. He can choose his own attorneys. He can be involved in the decisions. It's not, you're not handing it over under a lasting power of attorney. You're not handing over your decision making to your attorney in the same way you are with an EPA. They still have to work with you to reach whatever decision you're able to make, and only if you cannot make the decision do they then step in. So that's why I was saying it earlier on, that they are, although they look a bit similar, they are in fact very, very different, because the EPA is black and white, the lasting power is much more shades of grey and flexible.
Okay. And then my other question then following on from that would be, we have had contact again from adults who have children who are adults with quite complex needs, who have been denied access to medical information regarding their adult child who does not have the capacity. And then it's resulted in court proceedings to get that. And you probably know which, perhaps know what families I'm speaking of. Would the implementation of that change that, or would there be a situation in which those families could have automatic right to...
It wouldn't be automatic, but the big thing that is missing from the current system is there is no health and welfare element. So the court cannot appoint somebody to take decisions about a person's medical treatment or anything of that nature. The Medical Capacity Act will allow that to happen either if the person is capable, they can appoint an attorney for health and welfare issues, in which case that person would be entitled to access medical records, etc. Or the court could appoint a deputy, like a controller, but purely for health and welfare. So again, that process would be much, much simpler than, I mean, at the minute there is no process.
And if the adult child had sufficient capacity to make a health and welfare LPA, then obviously they could say, I authorise my parent to access so much of that information, and that's the thing. It's at the minute it doesn't exist, so there's just no.
And would we need entire implementation of the Act?
Well,
or is there any way it could be further steps?
No, because the Office of Public, not entire implementation of the whole Act, but parts 6 and 7 would need to be implemented to be able to implement the part about lasting powers of attorney, because you need the Office of Public, and that's what we were kind of saying. Is there any possibility to look at the Office of Care and Protection and see what there is there, see what they're already doing, see what capacity they have for kind of other, and see how that might be enmeshed together. But I don't think that's an option.
It's also maybe worth just mentioning, I mean, the current master is retiring, and there's a brand new master of the Office of Care and Protection will be coming in September. So, you know, now would be a great time actually if you were going to expand the role of that office. The new master would be able to sort of take that hopefully in her stride.
Okay, I think it's something then for us to follow up on as a committee for sure. It really does give us a good kind of direction and insight of what we can do, because we understand that budgets are stretched for everyone, but with the adult safeguarding bill, we would like to see full implementation, of course, of the Act, but as much as possible, even in steps. I have two more questions. One is another supplementary to a previous question on mental disorders in the 86 Act order. Is it 86? Compared to the 16 Act. Can you just highlight for someone who is not medical or from that background what the difference would be?
Well, it's under the 1986 order. It just says if you have a mental disorder, so it doesn't really define that. It's just any kind of impairment of whatever. The Mental Capacity Act doesn't have that. It basically says, you know, you either have capacity or you don't. So it says that if after you give somebody all of the support, they're unable, and there's a test, you know, to understand the information, to retain that information and to make that decision about it, then for that decision they don't have capacity. So that means then that someone might have capacity, for example, to make a will. They might have capacity to make just a power of attorney. They might have capacity to say one, you know, it's a sliding scale, and that's the thing. And that again, especially for people whose capacity can fluctuate, it means that it's not that straight away. Oh, you have this condition, therefore you mustn't have capacity. Okay. And that was again something that did resonate with me whenever we were at that event, where they said that literally the second the diagnosis is heard of dementia, they look to the family member, and that's, in our view, it's not writing someone off the second that you hear that there's something, an issue, and that's what the 2016 Act aims to do.
Even something as simple as once you have a registered power of attorney, so that's where you're saying this person now is incapable of managing their financial affairs, a bank normally won't even let that person operate a small current account. I mean, it is literally, it's over. Whereas if it is a lasting power of attorney, you could be saying, well, he or she can manage this on their own, but they need help with these other bits. And that again is a sort of a big gap that we're lacking.
And that's as well, I was attorney for a wee man who actually died last week, but he was able to live at home on his own. He was able to go to the shop every day to buy his paper and his cigarettes with the help of his carers, but I couldn't get a bank account for him, even restricted. So what I had to do was set up a Monzo account in my name, give him the card so that he could go in and tap his card so that he could buy his papers and buy his cigarettes. And that was the only workaround. And, you know, because he had appointed me as his attorney, he had no family, and, you know, that is a way to give him a bit of autonomy, that he can go and buy his paper and do what he likes, or buy his favourite bar of chocolate and all his cat food. He had lots of cats and he loved bought cat food every day. They were better fed than him. But it allowed him a chance to be able to do that for himself. At the minute, once a bank finds out that somebody has lost capacity, shutters are down. They can't get any money.
And they're very restricted as to what they can do. We would deal with the banks and their vulnerability forums, and they're very conscious and they're very wanting to be aware of trying to help people who maybe do want that, or they maybe just like the interaction of nipping down or having whatever. But they're like, we don't really know where we stand with all of this, and per our risk, this is what we have to do. We just have to have that line in the sand. And I think if then the principles were enacted, then it maybe gives the banks that kind of incentive to be able to say, well, actually, what can we do? Or what is possible? Or is there a prepay? Or is there a daily limit?
It would give them more flexibility, I think, to be able to work with people.
I think it's really important, you know, in terms of inclusion in life as well, especially with people with complex needs or special needs, to ensure that their capacity isn't removed and they can enjoy life as everyone else. It is quite given us something to go with on committee back to the department. I have a final question. Often when we get people up in front of us as a committee, we ask questions that are not directly related to the question that are in front of us, because it's an opportunity to have the organisation in front of us. And I'm going to ask a difficult question, and I'm unfair to ask it, but I have to. Our email boxes over the past few weeks have been flooded with disgust about character references being given during trials, and the fact that the Chief Executive of the Law Society gave a character reference to a convicted paedophile has really disgusted quite a lot of people, and would like to ask your views on whether the Law Society has actually dealt appropriately with that issue, because we have seen from people inside the email that was sent out, and it seems that an apology was given, but a lot of your members represent victims of violence, victims of sexual violence every single day in court, in your offices, and it hurt a lot of people, and this is the first opportunity that we've actually been able to ask any questions. It's unfortunate, it is nothing to do with the people sitting in front of me, but I wondered if anyone would like to actually answer how you feel they have responded.
I genuinely don't know, to be honest. This is above my pay grade. I'm literally in my conveyancing and non-contentious business box, and happily so for many things, because I just have that, so I genuinely don't know.
It's probably a question for the Law Society Council specifically.
It's not something that we can actually comment on at the minute, because there's a process ongoing in relation to that, so we can't prejudice that.
Given you've said that, I think we'll move on from that, if you're happy enough. Okay. We finished?
Yeah.
Dan?
Thank you. And Chair, for transparency, I want to declare that my son is a solicitor doing private client business and is a member of the committee. I think for me this has brought a number of issues into focus. First of all is the issue, probably nothing to do with you, but very pertinent to the committee, is that we have an adult protection bill that was brought before us, and the proviso at the front of that adult protection bill was that this can only be implemented in part as and when we have the funding to do it. And you have brought before us the issues that arise when you don't implement legislation in full as it's meant to. Now, I do understand the issues around funding, and I do understand those issues, but I still think that this is quite a conundrum, really, for the Minister and the Department to grapple with. And I think it's very important that we state that, air that, and maybe when we're talking about this after you leave, actually, maybe include that as part of our deliberations to the Minister. And it brings forward a number of challenges. When one of my great things that get to me is this issue of state overreach, or the issue that the state can do things to you that you are not able to challenge. And I think that is very important. So we have spoken, and I think the committee all know that we have spoken. One of the things that you mentioned was that the Mental Capacity Act of 2016 has all of the restrictions of liberty, but none of the advice as to how to deal with that. So I did go off and ask a question to the Minister around the number of people who would be subject to a deprivation of liberty order in whatever shape that takes. So there are differences. And that comes to around about 3,600 people in Northern Ireland are subject to a deprivation of liberty order. That is more than the prison population of Northern Ireland, and I went and looked at those figures too. So it is a very, very significant number of people. So just to describe, why someone is subject to deprivation of liberty and the difference that having that advocate might make for that person in the human terms that would do. And I'm sure that you get cases around on this issue, but I think it's really important that we understand the importance of the advocates. Now, in the bill that was before us, we have an amendment down to the bill, a committee amendment agreed that we shouldn't implement the bits of the bill that might take away liberty or interfere with your financial situation until those advocates are in place. In the Mental Capacity Act, how has that impacted people?
I think where the deprivations of liberty are concerned is obviously the trust is stepping in, or maybe the family members stepping in because they think this is on this person in their best interest. But say you take, for example, a family member, that family member is not going to be unbiased because their priority is going to be, please make sure that my loved one is safe. And if I know that if they're here and if they are in the care home and they can't leave, I know exactly where they are, I know they can't wander and they can't do this. So therefore, it's not that they don't have their family member's best interest at heart, but they have a biased view, whereas that independent advocate would be able to go in, talk to this person, explain what's going on, find out what their wishes are, and then try and get to a solution about their liberty that reflects what that person is. I think, Julianne, maybe you have had...
I had clients where a wee man had dementia, a deprivation of liberty was put on him by the trust. There was a social worker involved. The son and wife were at home, wanted to care for this man at home, but he had ended up in a nursing home after a hospital visit, and then a doll was put on him and he wasn't allowed to come out. and they got in touch with me completely distressed because they didn't understand what it was. It hadn't been clearly explained to them, I think. I spoke to the social worker, got the background from him, spoke to the client, set up a meeting so that we could actually explain it to them. And the lady wasn't well. She had cancer herself. She wasn't able really to look after her husband. But her cry was, I've been married to this man for 60 years. I've never had a night away from him. I don't want him in a nursing home. I want him at home with me, want a package in place. But the trust felt that he needed to be in the nursing home and in a locked EMI unit because of his diagnosis. And I think he was a bit of a wanderer as well. So for the man, yes, I think it was the right choice. But it wasn't until I sat down and chatted to them and explained it to them that they got it as well. And I think an independent advocate would probably be that sort of balance too, to a certain extent. And not everybody can afford to engage a solicitor to do that for them. So, you know, we are then ending up with a two-tiered system to a certain extent, because it's only the very wealthy will be able to engage a solicitor to do that, whereas an independent advocate should be there to be able to help you out at no cost, as I understand it, to the person. So, you know, that is making sure that it's also making sure that the person in the nursing home that's essentially locked up and has probably less rights than a prisoner does in a hospital, is make sure that it is the right place for them. And again, that whole holding family's hand is important, because they need to understand why somebody at all has been put onto somebody. But there just is, as Diane, as you have said, there's all these protections or deprivations of clients, but there's not the rights and the powers to try and deal with them, try and help them. And that's where the Capacity Act was supposed to do that, and under Section 1 and also then the independent advocate could take on board what that person's situation was as much as possible.
So the independent advocate is a really important part of the process. And so just a couple other questions that occurred to me as you're talking. So you are saying that if Section 1, then that would allow the law and you to interpret the law in a more in a wider context than the order allows you to do, and that's really important. So I did write to both the Justice Minister and the Health Minister, and I was told that there were guidelines were being developed, and I did actually speak to a friend who is a psychiatrist, so he would be involved in these things, and he said, we assess people all the time and we try to determine capacity. But is there a difference between those guidelines which said this is what you should do, whereas the law would say this is the law, this is what you must do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what significance, because it seems to me that we would be able, legislatively, we should be able to do something around Section 1. It's not going to cost, I don't think anybody said, but just tell us what the difference would be, that should or must.
I think it's part 1 obviously is all about the principles, and then I suppose from a healthcare worker's perspective, really there should, so when they are doing things, and that revised consultation on the code of practice that went out in December time talks about an independent advocate should be considered, for example, where possible, but obviously then that just means if you cannot, but I think part 1 for us from a legal perspective, obviously the correspondence we had from the Health Minister said, we are already trying to embody these principles in readiness for this. But from a legal perspective, if a judge is looking at something, they can definitively say, okay, yes, part 1, does this person have capacity, if capacity is an issue in that particular case? And in the same with Michael's case, that, the old power of attorney legislation is from 1987 as well. And I wouldn't say that it was drafted, they were maybe rationing words because they weren't very clear on capacity that's required. And even when we looked at that judgment, there was a lot to untangle to get to the bottom of where is this. Whereas if you have something that's in place that says there, when you're looking at capacity, these are the things that you need to think about. And if after all of these things that you've done all of them, that person still doesn't have capacity for that decision, then you know where you stand. Whereas at the minute, it's just as I say, yours took a lot of untangling to get to the bottom of it, even by the judge. You know, so if that would be a real help for the profession and for the judiciary, for the courts. From a healthcare perspective, we can't really comment other than to trust that, yes, healthcare workers are mindful of this. And I know we do talk to different kind of psychiatrists, and they say that it is something that they're doing, but they're trying to juggle. They're trying to juggle so many different things and codes of practice, and do I refer to the 86 order, do I refer to the Act? It's
really what you're saying is clarity.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, I think ultimately it comes back to my point about, the assisted decision making, that, what we're trying to do in every case with the legislation is help a person make a decision if they possibly can, and only if they cannot does the state step in. Whereas at the minute the state is stepping in, I think, far too early, and at a time when, I mean, for example,
or too rigorously.
You can register I could register your enduring power of attorney if I, as your attorney, thought that you had become or were becoming incapable. So it's that vague. So you only have to be demonstrating some degree of cognitive impairment. I can register your power of attorney, but as soon as I do that, your bank will no longer deal with you. They will only deal with me as the attorney. So again, I think it's like a light switch at the minute. You're either capable or incapable. What we need is this system that allows us to say, well, what are you capable of? Because those things you still make your own decisions for. If you are incapable of something else, that's where someone will have to step in to assist you.
So the Justice Minister said when I wrote to her that they'd set up a committee between health and justice to try and untangle some of this and make progress. Have you been invited to appear before it, or do you know about it? Or because one thing that health is really, really good at is throwing everything into process from which there is no outcome. And really, it seems to me that this is very, very important in an individual's life. And have you been invited?
We had
do you know about it?
Both the Minister for Justice and Minister for Health, and only the Minister for Justice mentioned the MCA Future Implementation Plan. It hasn't been referred to by the Minister for Health, and this is the first that we had heard of it.
Well, we haven't received any invitation anyway. Not to say that we wouldn't be happy to throw ourselves into whatever is necessary to try and kind of press for this or provide any clarity or anything like that.
We'd be very happy to participate.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's another kind of issue that we can actually deal with. Thank you very much. I think it brings into stark relief the issues that individuals face. And I was at the dementia event as well, that individuals, and we all heard the wonderful Julie talk about her journey and her diagnosis and how that impacts her, and she certainly had capacity. She could stand up and talk in front of a room full of people, and it was wonderful to hear her. But that's on one end of the scale, and there's lots more families who are completely on the other end of the scale that are crying out for some kind of clarity and help along the way in relation to this. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Linda?
Thank you, Chair, and you'll be glad to know, because everybody else has already asked questions. A lot of my questions have been answered, so I really do appreciate he's coming today, because it has definitely been a very informative session for me, just in terms of the scale of things that you face. But you mentioned, Michael, the issue of, a lot of this is ending up in front of the courts unnecessarily, and if we had actually implemented, that would make a big difference. You may not know the answer to this, but where do you think the majority of that cost is falling to? So is it falling to our justice system? Is it falling to our health system? Or is it falling to the individuals and families themselves? Or is there a first? Well,
I imagine it's spread across a number of things. I mean, certainly, you make an application to the Office of Care and Protection on behalf of a patient, a person without capacity. The costs of that, the legal fees, the court fee itself, they will pay. It comes out of their funds. But I imagine, there's a cost to the sort of court time, administration, all of that. And there are things that probably end up in front of judges that don't need to be there. Definitely.
I think, I mean, you've answered it. There's definitely a cost to resource in terms of our justice system, and I think that was fairly clear anyway. I think we might want to get some kind of an understanding of that, because one of the biggest challenges to implementing this is cost, but it's costing us. But more importantly, it's costing those individuals, yes, but their families. The trauma of having to go through this and having to try to navigate it for families, and you said it yourself, there's an inequality, because families with money can engage solicitors and families without money can't. And a solicitor with the best will in the world, and you've kind of alluded to this yourself, you're relying on the health professionals. You don't necessarily understand that end of it, and rightly so, no more than any of us, to be honest. But an independent advocate might well be able to have some understanding of that, and might actually be the best person to represent. And if then a solicitor is required, the independent advocate will be able to work with you and give you information that you wouldn't necessarily have. Because I mean, Julianne, I think you actually highlighted it in terms of the case that you talked about, and the fact that that gentleman was able to, or wanted to be able to, get his papers and all of that, and also some of the other cases that you have mentioned. But we're relying on the health professionals, and an independent advocate just might be able to delve. I've seen it in relation to the Muckamore cases, where independent advocates had information when we went into those meetings that nobody else would have had, and they were such a benefit to me as an MLA representing a family. So I don't think that we can overestimate the value of those independent advocates right throughout this process. But I think we do need to get an understanding from health, certainly from our own committee's perspective, but then in terms of health dealing with justice, what is the cost to our system of not implementing this? I think there definitely is. We need to understand that before we can move forward, because we can't keep having this issue of cost used as an excuse not to do things when we know that money has been spent that could be saved if we implemented things. And we know this happening every day whenever we're in this committee, Chair, so I think we need to establish that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions. This has been very useful, and really appreciate you coming in and answering our questions.
Thank you for letting us come. I hope it has been useful.
Indeed.
We're happy to answer any other follow-up queries, emails or anything like that.
I am sure, we'll have a conversation here, but some of that will be writing to the ministers, and when we get correspondence back, we will certainly be looking at your response to that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, members, just given all of that, I don't think there's going to be any difficulty or dissension that we write to both departments and raise the issues that I think we should forward on the presentation we got and write to both ministers raising all of those. There's a lot of issues there. I think we should go beyond seeking a response. I think we should be saying that we want action with regard to Section 1 being implemented at the very least. Can I also,
Chair, ask, I think it's important that we talk about Section 1, because they are saying that they then can interpret capacity in light of the implementation of Section 1, which I think is an important issue. The Office of Care and Protection in the Public Guardian's Office, as envisaged by the Mental Capacity Act, could we ask, has there been any assessment as to whether or not it would be useful to amalgamate the two, and is there any either overlap or problem, with doing that? Is there a conflict really with doing it? I don't know. The way these folk describe it, it might potentially be two offices doing work in relatively the same area. But there might be a conflict or a legal conflict that I obviously don't know about it, which I think is important. Okay.
Is everybody's content with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Item number 9, which is the written briefing from the Department on Workforce Policy. So, members received the briefing at page 100. So, myself and Danny also got an email, as you have seen from the Royal College of Nurses that we've sent out to people. I think there's a hard copy. On the, so I mean, we probably had our own queries in relation to the department's workforce strategy. The letter from the Royal College of Nursing has identified a number of concerns that they have. So I mean, I think we start by maybe writing to the department expressing some of those concerns, what has been achieved against the original objectives, and why at this stage are fundamental gaps still remaining. I mean, we could ask, I think maybe if the department can clearly demonstrate what has been achieved against each of their 3 headline objectives, and if targets haven't been met, why not?
We also, Chair, ask, I appreciate that any workforce planning is kind of planning on almost filling the gaps, but not filling the need. And we've asked the question many times about the assessment of what's needed, not gaps. And I know because they ad hocly raise the number of trainee posts for different allied health professionals or over the years, but there's actually just been no assessment of what's needed in the workforce for our current population. People are sick, waiting lists, and I think that we ask it every time, but
and that's what the RCN were saying, that they're saying like the fact that there hasn't yet been a comprehensive population-based workforce plan. So that's very much what you're.
I've seen that email because we got it just.
I mean, that's exactly what they're saying. That one of the things we should be asking is why is there a continued absence of a comprehensive population-based work programme, and I think we should definitely do so. I mean, I think we should formulate their kind of key concerns as well as that. Ask about, can the department demonstrate what actually has been achieved against its own targets? People content with that? No, Linda?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think obviously if we're talking about that, we're talking about right across the workforce. It's allied health professionals, as you mentioned as well, because it was actually raised with me by somebody who is newly qualified in that sphere and is telling me that they cannot get a permanent position, and yet we're saying that we have, and it's as a speech therapist, by the way. So I mean, like, we're constantly been told about the shortage of speech therapists, and that's really concerning for me. So what they're telling me is that you can there was only one position advertised, and that one position was for somebody with experience, so they couldn't apply for it. Now, we're training more people, and what are we training them for? Training them to go somewhere else? Training them to sit in the ether and have no permanent position? What are they being trained for? Actually invest in additional training places, and rightly so, because we absolutely know we need them. We all know this because we all have constituency offices where people are coming to us day and daily telling us they can't get physio, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all of those different issues for older people and children and people with complex disabilities. But we're actually the cost of training them, but we're training them for somewhere else because they're not getting to stay here and have a job. That's a problem, and I think it's something that we definitely need to highlight in any letter we're sending to the department, because we need to find out the detail of that. That's a problem.
Can I just add to that, Chair? I got a similar email. This one was about physiotherapists. Tom Sullivan then indicated that he had spoken to the department, and there is going to be a rerun of a competition for physiotherapists, I think by the end of June, if I'm not mistaken. But it just seemed to me that the trust in the department, neither of the two really know what the other's doing. The trusts had not, they'd advertised the first tranche as for people with experience. Nobody was told, and none of the young people who were graduating were told this. And then it turns out there will be graduate jobs, but they weren't told that these would only be applied later. In the meantime, they've applied for jobs in England and, and all over the place. So we have trained some of those people, and we will not reap the benefit of that. When they would have stayed at home, would have liked to have stayed at home if this had been properly done. I thought it was dreadfully mishandled. Can I just ask, just as it's not the same issue, but sort of tangentially belongs to it, safer staffing legislation.
Can we get an update on that, are we? Oh no, it's the Judy Canner, go ahead.
I'm happy to say we've had a response from the department on legislation. The latest we've been told in relation to safe staffing is they're planning to introduce it at the start of October.
Okay.
We're going to have a conversation probably about that later on, because there's a number of concerns about when we're going to get legislation and the impact that's going to have on our work. So, I mean, in terms of the physiotherapy specifically, you raised that before. We've already asked that question, but so I think in this letter we should go beyond that. I mean, I did an engagement with a number of students at an event yesterday. I think this week's gone that busy. I can't remember, it was yesterday or the day before, but it was in particularly medical students, the issues that you're raising, so across all aspects, doctors, nurses, allied health professionals, where in some cases there might not be enough training places. I mean, we hear this every week here from every sphere. There's workforce issues. So I mean, I really do think it's something. I mean, I can't understand how there aren't data gatherers within the Department of Health that aren't able to put together programs that can solve these problems, at least identify them. I mean, it amazes me, but anyway, so I certainly think we should go beyond what the RCN have asked, but we should ask their questions as a starting point and across all spheres.
It's also that the Trust don't know what the Department's doing, they don't know what NIMT's at, and nobody thinks of talking to each other before they advertise jobs in a particular way. And then they cause a lot of distress to the young people that are going to apply for these jobs. Absolutely. And as a consequence, we lose talent from the health service.
Through our own mismanagement.
Inadequacy to advertise properly.
So, do we get generally a written briefing every number of months on this?
On the workforce, it's usually every 6 months.
Okay, fair enough. Right, well, we'll write to that and we'll see if we can get a response to that in advance of the next written briefing. Okay, members, if we're content with that, move on to correspondence. So can I refer members to correspondence? We have an index at page 128 with suggested action. So just on the point of legislation, there's correspondence on the duty of candour bill at tab 11.4. So, I mean, there is concerns in relation to our ability as a committee to fully scrutinise that bill, which, as we know, is going to be extremely important and probably lengthy if it hasn't been just introduced until November. So, what I'm going to suggest, if members are happy, that we write to the department to request further information on the reasons for delay in introducing that bill, the duty of candour, and to request that work is undertaken to introduce the bill as soon as possible. If everybody's content with that.
Can I ask just on that, are we going to have a general chat about legislation, or
in the forward work program? We can if you want, yeah.
Just concerned about how long that will give us.
Yep.
You know,
we'll talk about that in the further forward work program. So members, also the ministerial statement regarding the Atherton report. So Danny, you want to?
No, I just thought very, very disappointed that the minister decided to not support the public inquiry, and I think that this committee has heard a lot from the committee or from the campaign and from people affected, and we've met with them quite a lot of times, and the committee was unanimous, you know, that there needed to be a full public inquiry to get to the truth of this. So very disappointed that the minister has decided. It did strike me as bizarre that the Atherton report says that he had not spoken to anybody who worked there at the time, which obviously a full public inquiry would.
Yeah, I mean, so, I think we all going by the questions that we've asked in here, and also that we asked the minister the other day, expressed the same view. I was baffled by it, to be honest. I'm baffled by the explanation of, you know, we've heard all that we are likely to hear, but how do you know that unless you have a public inquiry? You know, it literally is self-defeating, and there's certainly issues of accountability and holding people to account, and that issue of public trust, I think, is a major issue for women in our health service, and I don't think the minister's announcement has done anything to advance public trust in that service. Dan?
Oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if everybody's in agreement, could we write to the Minister expressing, the committee's disappointment if everybody's still in favour of that?
I suppose there's two things that really got me quite upset by that. One was the denying the public inquiry, but the other thing was that the Minister chose to announce this via a written statement to the Assembly, where unless we'd had the urgent oral, we wouldn't have been able to ask any questions. And in that public statement to the Assembly, he did not mention the names of Lindsay Courtney or Erin Harbinson. And I have been talking to particularly Lindsay Courtney's family, and they are hugely, hugely upset by the fact that she was not even acknowledged. And I think that, I don't know, I don't know how or why it was chosen to be done that way, but I think in the interest of humanity it should have been, and compassion, it should have been acknowledged. And I agree. I just think that we are in danger of saying to women that these things can happen, but no one is ever held to account. And I think that is the wrong message to send out, and I would really like that recorded as part of our letter as well. And can I also wish Heather Thompson well? She's not very well today, and I hope that she's better soon.
I think we should include that. I think we should include in the letter that a written statement on Thursday could have waited until Monday or Tuesday until the Assembly was sitting, and that would have been the most appropriate. So we should express disappointment that. I absolutely think we should express disappointment that he didn't mention those two families. I think that we should express disappointment that he came up with the rationale or the decision that he did as well. Those are three things I think we should certainly include in the letter if everybody's happy. Yeah, or Linda?
Just want to come in quickly on it, Chair. I don't feel I got an answer to my question in the Chamber, I have to say, around what has changed around the governance, oversight and accountability of the cervical screening programme, and I would like that to be included in the letter. Can we get, I would like it actually broke down exactly what has been put in place and what has changed, because we've kind of been given answers to what we're doing, what we're trying to do, recommendations, but I just would like to know exactly, because the truth is it's very difficult to navigate, and I understand that might be my own ignorance, and that's why I'm asking for it in that manner, and that was why I asked the Minister for it in that manner in the Chamber. I agree with much of what Diane has said, to be fair. I think the issue of how we were given the information, well, firstly I had requested, and I think it was right, that the ladies be given the embargoed report before any MLA, because at the end of the day it was them who mattered, and the families of both Erin and Lindsay, I think, absolutely. And I know that Lindsay's family were hurt because they felt they did not get that invite, and that is an issue in itself. But there is no reason, because they were very prepared to come up here. Yeah. They were more than prepared, and I understand that had it been even explained to them the reason why it was done, because my assumption is it was done where it was done as to accommodate those ladies that were from the Southern Trust area, and maybe in a trauma-informed practice away from this building. But that conversation wasn't had with them. They were definitely very happy to come up here, and they would have been more than happy to have come up here on Monday or Tuesday, been given an embargoed report that morning, and the statement being given that afternoon or evening. And I mean, the people who are interested in this are interested in it. We would have stayed to any time.
It's not the first time something like this has happened where a minister has done
it. It was done in relation to the HIA stuff and on other issues that were very sensitive, and had victims and survivors, and had to have a victims and survivor centred approach. So it's possible, and I made that very point when I asked for this to be given to them first, was that it could be done in line with how this has been done previously, where there are victims and survivors who needed to be consulted. So I would like that put in the report, or put in the review. I also think let's ask the Minister to look again at this decision. You know, I don't think we should just accept it and express our disappointment. Look again, because women's health, this is a wider issue. this is a much wider issue, and it is a wider issue even specifically around the cervical smear stuff, because we've had, and I'm sure you've had correspondence too, Deanne, from people in the Western Trust, and Ocean McLaughlin raised it in the chamber. So there's a wider issue just in relation to the cervical smear issue, but women's health in general, and the fact that women do feel, and I certainly feel it on their behalf, that they are second-class citizens within our health system. And I'm not saying that's the intention of anybody, but it is real. It is not perceived. It is very, very real. And we know that from a number of presentations that we've had in the past around women's health. Just, and I know I've talked a wee bit long on it, but it's an important issue.
It is an important issue. Okay, so we've agreed to do that. There's a couple of other things I kind of want to just identify. So at point 6, the Minister's response on home care provision. So I mean, this is something that is just, it's kind of getting to the point where it's really beginning to, frustration, and so I can understand how people working in this frustration. I mean, we just keep getting stonewalled from the Minister in relation to this issue, and it is one of it's one of the biggest impacts. It's having one of the biggest impacts on our healthcare. So I'm just frustrated at the answer that is given. Again, that there's
what number was that, Chair? 11?
It's 11.6.
Yeah.
So we had written to him expressing some concerns in relation to the home care sector, and we had the motion, and it's all the same. So I'm just again expressing frustration that not enough action is happening to support that sector of our healthcare. I mean, it was in relation to the ongoing impact of fuel prices, specifically on workers. So it is having an impact on those workers. We're going to lose workers as a result of that, and that's going to have an impact on the care that we're able to provide, particularly in rural areas. So I just keep my fingers crossed that at some point we're going to wake up to good news for that sector. The other thing I just wanted to point out myself was we got a letter there from the SOAS group in Fermanagh. So they have a number of questions to be forwarded. I think we should do that on their behalf. Last thing at point 32, I think all MLAs got an email from Dr. Kerry Hughes, her father, and his experience at Alton Galvin. So I think we're agreeing on the actions to forward that to the department and the trust to get a response. But it points out a very bleak picture of Alton Galvin and the impact that is having on patients there. And I would look forward to that response.
Sadly, I've heard and seen very, very similar experiences. I don't think it's particularly in one hospital or one trust. It's right across our A&Es. Those long waits and the level of treatment that is available, but due only because of the long waits. And that relates to the home care issue that you mentioned earlier.
I think there's a specific issue in Alton Galvin in terms of the building and the facilities and whatnot. I know the Minister has said there's going to be new building there, but this is having an impact on patients and families and also the people who work there in the meantime. So Dr. Hughes has raised a number of very important issues, and I think it's right that we forward those on and try and get a response from that. There's a number of things, members. There's correspondence from Neurology Justice Collective with a request to meet the committee regarding neurology recall, and that's at tab 1127. I'm not sure if that members have any. Yes, Dan.
So I did meet these folk, and some of their stories, as we heard with the previous session we did with patients and patients' loved ones. Some of these stories are pretty awful. Is it possible that at some stage these folk could come up and talk to the committee again? Because I think that the biggest issue is the lack of action. We think that we perceive action, but they say there isn't any. And we've got to find out why that gap is there and what particularly the Belfast Trust are doing about that. And I suppose just adding to that, I think maybe if we can write to the department as well separately to the speaking to these patients about neurology services across Northern Ireland, because that is where some of the longest waiting lists still occur. If we can find out what those waiting lists are like in each trust area, what the provision is, and what the intention is, going back to the staffing issue. I mean, I'm told that one of the issues in the Southern Trust is staffing. So it's appropriate staffing.
Well, I mean, are you content, Dan, that we asked them up for an informal meeting?
Oh yes, I think.
Everybody else content with that?
Aye, yeah.
Okay. Just also, members, there's a response at 11:30. It's correspondence to be sent to the Education Authority in relation to the summer schemes. I think it's a very disappointing response, to be honest with you. It's just this continuation of blame. But I know it's a response. It's just everybody's blaming everybody else, but there we go. Is there any member have any other, sorry, just one other thing in terms of point 18. So it's the briefing in relation to the Regional Trauma Network, or can we ask that we as a health committee get the briefing paper as well?
Chair.
Yes, Dan.
So page 249, I don't know what point that is, sorry. I'm sure you're much better organised than me. Ursula's Law. So yes. This came about from these folk who are largely people whose loved ones died during COVID and whose loved ones died a very lonely death. And this is about having care partners, making sure that even in the same, extreme situation that we were in during COVID, that people wouldn't be alone. And I do think that is worthwhile talking to those folk, again, a bit like the neurology patients, if they could come up and have that conversation with us and how they see that developing, and what people's rights are to have people with them at that really vulnerable time in their lives.
Yeah, content with that. I actually had it down. In terms of what are we suggesting that we forward their correspondence to them, to the department, get a response? But I'm happy enough to do an informal meeting as well.
Just 2 points quickly, just on the back of Dan's point around Ursula's Law. I would like to get an understanding from, not necessarily from the department, but actually the health professionals that were working on those wards, because the same people who sat with people when they were dying had to deliver that information to their families.
Yes.
The nurses.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can have been easy. So we need to get an understanding of the impact on those nurses, because I asked it at the time, are the management within the hospitals making sure that that's not the case? And I know it was the case. I know it was the girls and fellas, mostly girls, standing or sitting with that person as they died, having to then contact their family and tell them, in circumstances where their family couldn't be with them and where they wanted to be with them, it must have been horrendous. I can't even begin to imagine how that impacted those staff members. So I think we need to get an understanding.
Are you suggesting that we ask that of either the Trust or the RCN or the Royal College of GPs?
I think RCN.
Okay.
I think RCN, because I'm not sure we get that information from Trust
I
or
think
department.
also that this it poses a wider problem for us all, and I don't know whether it's been solved or not. In any pandemic planning for the future, and the COVID inquiry said that we should be planning. Yes. How have they dealt with this issue? Has it even been thought about? I mean, I think sometimes in health there are things that we can do that are not hugely costly but would be beneficial. And I think that particularly these folk would feel that they had really changed the landscape for others if that was enacted.
Well, I mean, I think in forwarding their letter to us, to the health department, we should ask that question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Just the last thing is on the Dexcom, the failure to respond to the questions the health minister. I've also written to the health minister on that, and I've lost the page, so I'm thinking that we're probably, the action is to write to the Minister.
It's not, it's to note, because there's a lot of questions that aren't answered, and it's not necessarily the committee's responsibility to chase up.
So can we write to the Minister on the issue rather than the questions then? Because it is an issue, and I have real concerns that we're going to end up with serious adverse incidents here, and we're going to wait till somebody dies and then deal with it.
Okay, everybody content with that?
Yeah.
So, forward work programme. The forward work programme is at page 453. Keith, I'm going to bring you in. Well, what we'll do is we'll do any other business. Any other business? None. Date, time, place of next meeting. Next meeting is room 29, Thursday 28th at 2 p.m. I give my apologies. I'll not be here. So what we're going to do is, before we close, we'll close and go into a session to talk about the forward work programme.
Committee room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 sound.